On this computer. All right, we are recording. Hello, y'all. I am here with Morag Reid. She has agreed to be interviewed from Elgin, Scotland. She is a nurse working for the NHS, which stands for National Health Services in the UK, and she has a beautiful Scottish accent, which I'm very excited to let everyone hear in a moment. I met her through our mutual friend, Oliver Gaywood, who connected us, and I'm just going to jump into questions, Morag, if that's okay?
First.
Okay, great. So I'll just start with a more broad question. When and why did you become a nurse, and what is a day in your life typically like?
So I became a nurse 13 years ago this year. I started straight from high school just after I turned 18. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to work with people. And I ended up speaking to an old family friend who's a nurse, and it was just a bit of a light bulb moment. And ever since then, like I did 4 years of training in Edinburgh. I graduated with honours, and then I've pretty much worked in orthopaedics since I qualified, so bones, so kind of elective and trauma. Until November last year, when just because of sort of parenting commitments and things, I left my job there and joined the nurse bank. So I now work all over the hospital, but basically, like, since the start of kind of the coronavirus outbreak, I've mostly been working in the accident and emergency department.
Okay, right. And yes, I forgot to mention that you're a mother of two as well. So you said a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Yeah, busy household.
yes. And from a bank, so that means that does that mean that you go where they tell you to?
You can do, like, we book shifts through a system. You can book where you want to go, but you might get moved when you arrive, or you can book like a float shift, so you can be put anywhere. But like I say, I've mostly been working in the emergency department since the outbreak. So,
right.
So a typical day there would start by 8 o'clock in the morning. We do 12-hour shifts, and we obviously get a huge variety of things through the door. It can be anything. With being an emergency department, we deal with sort of GP referrals, we deal with ambulances, people who present at the department. So it's a really good mix of things.
Right. And I want to talk more about just all these changes that have happened, but because I know some people that watch this are going to be from the US, where I'm originally from, and possibly people in Australia. So we don't have an equivalent of the NHS, I don't think. So without getting very complicated, how would you describe that in a nutshell?
The NHS is just basically like a healthcare service available to anybody and everybody. You do pay tax obviously here towards it, but there's no limit on treatment that you would get here. You can turn up with a broken leg or a cut finger and you'll get treated, or anything more complex that requires intensive care, anything like that, or surgery, and it's all covered. Like, we don't have to worry about insurance.
So if you have a broken leg, if you come in, you don't necessarily leave with thousands of dollars in debt or anything like that.
No, you don't get billed at all.
Right. Wow. And that is what your Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, when he caught COVID-19, he was serviced by that as well, I think.
Yeah,
is that right?
He attended an NHS hospital and was cared for in an NHS intensive care. So yeah, it's a great service. I'm very proud to work.
And he was I think I saw that he named his new baby after some of the nurses that cared for him.
I think it was two of the intensive care doctors were called I think it's Nicholas or something.
Yeah. That was kind of interesting to me. So clearly your life has been affected by COVID-19 since it's happened, but do you remember when you first heard about what was happening in China, and did you ever think it might come to this small town in Scotland?
Not to the extent that it has. When we first heard about it, my mind more went to like SARS and swine flu, and obviously they did affect people here, but like nothing like this scale. You know, we've obviously never seen anything like this before. No, so I don't think I really anticipated just quite how much it would affect things.
And I guess it is affecting things now. So that's kind of my next question. So from a big picture point of view, is it affecting? It's clearly affecting the UK. The UK is one of the most hardest hit in the region, but also you have patients in your small. It's not a huge hospital that you're working at in the moment.
No.
But you're having some of them affected by it.
Yeah, we are seeing patients come through the department who are exhibiting symptoms. So they're obviously being tested and treated. Obviously, like in the area, people are being tested within the community as well. They maybe don't necessarily require hospital admission. Any of the more severe cases are going through to like our big city, Aberdeen, which is about an hour and a half away. So they have intensive care facilities. We only have like a high dependency unit within the hospital, so we aren't able to ventilate patients should they require it.
So if it becomes very serious, then you have to send them to Aberdeen.
Yeah.
But is it so they have the symptoms? Is it fairly certain that a lot of them are positive COVID-19 patients, or is it?
Not necessarily. Like, we're screening people as they come into the department. So if they were to tick off any box that might suggest they have COVID-19, then they would be treated as a COVID patient until proven otherwise. But it may be that you have a temperature from something else, or you might have a cough that's unrelated to COVID. So
is that interesting? So if when you and your colleagues are working with a patient, you may not even be 100% positive that they're COVID-19 or not.
No, but we're erring on the side of caution and wearing appropriate PPE until such a time as we're able to ascertain that they are not COVID.
Right. And so have you found out at a later date that like someone that you worked on was positive?
Yes, obviously there's going to be cases where that happens, but because we're now for like all your shift, we're now wearing a mask, a fluid resistant mask. Any patient we come into contact with, we're wearing a fluid repellent apron and gloves, so we are protected in the event that somebody does later turn out to be positive.
Okay, so that's I'll just jump ahead a little bit, because that was something that I have heard about in a lot of parts of the world, is that there's not the equipment and the PPE and stuff like that, but it sounds like actually you guys are doing really well.
Yeah, like in my experience of working, like we haven't had any shortages, so far.
Great.
They're projecting ahead to kind of identify how much stock we'll need and things like that, and they seem to be fairly well organized, so that's reassuring. And we're always made to feel that there's no if we want to wear PPE for something, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, that's really interesting and kind of a little bit different from the nurse in Nashville that I talked to that didn't have quite the same situation. And so and that's got to make everyone feel probably just better about everything, I'm guessing. Like you're not, yeah, that's wonderful. And I guess you're pretty suited up. You have a spacesuit on when you go to work and when you come home at the end of the day.
No, not quite. Because we're not, we're doing any kind of aerosol generated procedure, so for example if somebody was being intubated or that, like that's when they would go for the full suit and boot and space helmet. But other than that, we've got standard PPE like set out by the national guidelines. So I have to say, like personally, I felt fairly safe at work. Good.
That's so good. That's so good. And when you get home, so I have heard some people that are worried about it, they like stripped down before they go inside the house, or some doctors are like separating from their family completely. Do you feel pretty okay about?
I mean, obviously, like, it's quite a worry, the thought of bringing anything
Yeah.
home, especially with the kids. But I'm just trying, like, it's not really possible for us to separate because my husband works offshore.
Yeah.
I've got the kids at home, so I'm just following a very strict routine when I come in the back door. I've got a box for all my work things to go into. I strip off, put everything straight into the washing machine, uniforms straight into the machine as well. And then just really, like, don't touch anything, go straight for a shower and really scrub everything. Like, my hair's been washed so many times.
We've all become so aware of hygiene, but I mean, I know that that's kind of the protocol for the medical industry anyway, is that you just have to be so careful. But I was curious how, so I guess because I've been reading about the UK, about France, Italy in particular, like these three countries that have seen a lot of like really sad things. And I actually had a really interesting conversation with Oliver about the UK versus Scotland and what is a country and what is a kingdom, but it's embarrassing. I should understand it better. But so clearly there's way more people in England than there are in Scotland, but how do you feel that, have you seen personally, like, are you concerned about Scotland? Do you feel like they're doing better? What is your observations about how Scotland is managing in comparison to the UK?
I think because we're all running from, like, the national UK guidelines, we're all kind of running along the same track, but like, obviously the First Minister for Scotland is briefing us daily.
Okay.
Which is good, and I think she's been very transparent and clear about what's happening. She's being quite realistic about the length of lockdown and the fact that we can't really relax any rules just yet. We're having, like, I would say they're keeping the public quite well informed here. I can't really speak for England, but I mean, we're certainly getting a lot of, like, radio clips and adverts on the telly just reminding you, like, of the the rules and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
right. So how long have you guys, ballpark figure, how long have you guys been locked down?
I was trying to figure this out last night, so I think it's 40 something days.
Right. And that means, so I talked to my friend in Spain, and he said in Spain they couldn't even go out to exercise. Can you guys do that?
Yeah, so we're allowed out for an hour of exercise a day. We're also allowed out for, like, essential shopping. And, like, if you're, like, for example, like, my mum's caring for my papa who's 94,
right,
she's allowed out to go to him to cause his care has been kind of cut, so she's taken over that 4 times a week. So things like that you're allowed out for.
Right. Were you so I know it seemed, I guess because I was probably watching it from the US while in Australia and quite worried about the US, I felt like almost Australia did not act quick enough with the lockdown laws. Did you feel that Scotland acted quickly? Were you relieved? Were you annoyed? What was yours?
I mean, it's like, so Scotland was locked down at the same time as, like, the UK as a whole was locked down, and that wasn't a from Scottish Parliament's decision, as far as I'm aware. Probably, like, in my personal opinion, I would say, like, the locking down sooner might have prevented some of the spread.
Yeah.
But obviously it's so hard to say, it's so hard to call, like, you don't know what information the government have, and it's a tricky decision. I don't envy them, but personally I think if we'd gone into lockdown a bit earlier, it might have been beneficial.
Are you feeling are you seeing, since you've been working in the hospital, are you noticing the, like, fewer people with symptoms? That was a
I mean,
surprise question, sorry.
no, it's fine. I'm just thinking, because we didn't really have people with symptoms, massive number of people with symptoms before, like we're probably seeing more now because people are probably more aware of what they're looking for. But yeah, I don't know, I wouldn't say no, I'm not a massive increase. We did experience like a period where we weren't really seeing a lot of patients at all. I think people were a bit frightened to come to hospital, but there's been a big push the last few weeks for people to be aware that the hospitals are still there and still open for anything, you know, that's not COVID related. So it's a worry that people are, like, especially elderly, vulnerable people sitting at home unwell.
And do you feel that it's maybe people who, can anyone get tested, like even if you don't have symptoms, or is it still just for, I know they're just starting to relax it, is it?
They're opening up the testing for people, so anybody that's considered a frontline worker, I believe, can get tested. Anybody whose family members are showing symptoms, so for example, like if my husband or one of the children started showing symptoms, automatically I would have to self-isolate for 14 days and not go to work. But because I can get tested as a frontline worker, I could attend one of the local test centres, have my test back within, I think, 48 hours, and then be able to return to work if it was clear. So it's good, it's enabling people to get back to work quicker. You know.
Have you had to take a test yet?
No, I've tested people, but I've not been tested myself.
Oh, have you tested someone? I hear it's
pretty grim. Yeah.
Like, is it like you stick something up their nose and down their throat? Is that right?
Yeah. So you take the swab and you have to get like a pretty far back into their throat for about 15 seconds. Which generally makes people retch. It's pretty horrible. And then their noses, you have to swab both sides of their nose as well. And again, the swab has to go pretty far back in order to get an accurate test. So it's not great.
I'm so hopeful that this is something in the future that they can find an easier way to do it. Like, my dream is if it could just be like a breathalyzer.
That would be great.
I have just a few more questions, but I just quickly wanted, because we do have just a little bit more time, and I wanted to ask what the situation was with your kids, because your so school is school canceled throughout all of the UK, is that right?
Yeah, so school's cancelled for all the children. They've been off since before Easter, well, obviously since before lockdown. So they have opened childcare hubs for frontline workers. So any household where like both parents are frontline workers, or like myself, where my husband's working away and I'm on my own, kids can go into these hubs, and that allows obviously parents, frontline workers, to go to work. The hours don't necessarily fit in, but the department I'm working in have been very flexible with what I'm doing.
So, do you feel, a lot of your colleagues might have kids as well, I'm guessing? I was reading how a lot of kids have parents who are nurses, so it's a challenge. I think that in Australia they haven't officially completely closed all schools, but 95% of kids like aren't in school anymore. But yeah, it's hard, but I'm glad that you're able to work, and I'm so glad for what you're doing. So thank you for that. I feel more, I guess, and I haven't met you before this, but you seem very calm and collected. And do you feel like have you been stressed? Have you been okay? And do you think that, what are your thoughts moving forward in the future of the world?
I don't think I've ever felt so like scared being at work. In some ways, but in others I think it's more the anticipation of going to work now. Like when you're there, it's absolutely fine because you're all in it together, everybody's dealing with things, and it's okay. I think we need to be like prepared for the fact that this is probably going to, you know, peak and trough for quite some time. And it has changed probably the way we work. But I mean, I'm super proud of how, you know, like how well we're being able, you know, we're adapting to things. You know, it's different. It's a different way of working, but everyone's pretty like seems to be, you know, doing really well. We're updating daily. We get a daily update out from our health board, just with the latest numbers, the latest guidance. So it's really, you know, it's good to have that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel so much for frontline workers and how it wasn't something, I mean, I think, of course, nurses and doctors signed up to help people, but this is like next level, you know? So I can imagine kind of the uncertainty, and I appreciate that you keep going, and I'm sorry that this has happened to go ahead.
No, I think like I've been keeping a journal throughout this, and I think it's going to be something that's going to be pretty incredible to look back on. Obviously just now it's pretty stressful, and you know, things are so different, but I mean, it's pretty incredible to be working through this.
Have you had, and I guess there's probably some confidential, so it's okay if you don't, and this is another surprise question that just popped in my head, but have you had a specific patient or a specific moment that was beautiful or bittersweet, or that you've worried about that you haven't been able to, like, that you've sent to Aberdeen, or, I mean...
I'm trying to think what I can tell you.
I know, it's okay if you can. I know it's confidential. Yeah.
I have had one moment where, which was actually on my last set of night shifts, and it was pretty emotional. I can't really go into detail about it. I mean, it's something that I definitely want to remember, and it's something that you know, I think I'll keep as a sort of like reflective piece for my own like nursing practice.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so good to kind of talk to people like you and Alan, the other nurse I interviewed, because sometimes people can't see their family. So to know that you've got compassionate people that are there with your loved ones is like really lovely. I'm going to start crying.
That's something that I, you know, like obviously we're getting people in emergency situations. Their loved ones might be, you know, like seriously unwell, and it's trying to reassure people that, you know, we are looking after them, and you know, we're there to hold their hand when they can, you know. That's a big part of my job for me, and like, you know, I'm very passionate about patient care, and
so maybe that's kind of part of the silver lining, is that this is a time that nobody on earth that nobody living has ever experienced before, but there are a lot of people helping, and there are a lot of people that are passionate about that. So I guess that's that is you've kind of answered that question. But so I guess you're kind of like, it's not a sprint, right? It's a long journey, and you're kind of aware that it's not going to be over tomorrow, but you're going to keep.
No, unfortunately, no. I wish it would be, but I think we need to, obviously, like, people need to stay in lockdown, respect the rules, and just like flatten the curve out. That's like the message, I think, and hopefully, if they do that, we can get out and see our friends and family again.
I think you're right, Morag. Thank you so much for what you're doing and taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me.